Rain hammered the cathedral windows like bullets against stone. 24-year-old Seraphina Vale stood frozen in pale blue silk, searching desperately for her father in the crowd, only to find a scarred stranger watching her from the altar with eyes that promised violence. Lucien Moretti, the Mafia Boss newspapers called the Ghost, waited with terrifying patience as her father confessed the unthinkable. He'd traded her to the Moretti family as payment for secret debts, marriage instead of execution. She had 30 minutes before becoming Mrs. Lucien Moretti, bride to the man who wanted her as a living weapon of revenge. If you're watching this story unfold, hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me what city you're in. I want to see how far Seraphina's nightmare reaches across the world. The rain started 3 hours before Seraphina Vale's life ended. She stood outside the cathedral entrance, pale blue silk clinging to her shoulders, staring at the carved wooden doors like they might swallow her whole. Water streamed down the steps. Thunder rolled somewhere over Rome's ancient rooftops. Her father gripped her elbow too tight, fingers digging through fabric into bone. "Straighten up," he muttered. "Don't embarrass me." Seraphina wanted to ask what she was doing here, why he dragged her from the apartment before dawn, why he looked like a man walking toward his own execution. But the words stuck in her throat the way they always did around Thomas Vale. Her father, the gambler, the liar, the man who'd spent 24 years teaching her that silence was safer than questions. The cathedral doors opened. Warm light spilled across wet stone. Organ music drifted out, low and ominous, the kind of sound that belonged to funerals instead of celebrations. Seraphina's pulse hammered against her ribs as her father pulled her inside. The space stretched impossibly large. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow. Stained glass windows glowed with fractured color. Saints and angels watching from above with cold, indifferent eyes. Rows of wooden pews lined both sides of the aisle, filled with men in expensive suits and women dripping in diamonds. Everyone turned to look at her, not with curiosity, with pity. Seraphina's stomach twisted. This wasn't a wedding. Weddings had flowers and laughter and bridesmaids. This felt like a transaction, a transfer of goods. She scanned the crowd desperately, searching for anyone she recognized. Her mother's old friends, distant cousins, someone who could explain what fresh hell her father had dragged her into. Then she saw him, standing at the altar like a king carved from midnight. Lucien Moretti. Even from 50 feet away, he radiated violence. Broad shoulders wrapped in tailored black wool, sharp jawline, dark hair slicked back from a face that belonged on Renaissance sculptures. Beautiful and cruel in equal measure. A thin scar cut through his left cheekbone, pale against olive skin. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold. Black eyes. Empty eyes. The kind that had watched men die and felt nothing afterward. He stared at her with the patience of a predator who knew the prey had nowhere left to run. Seraphina's knees buckled. Her father's grip tightened, holding her upright as he forced her forward down the aisle. Every step felt like drowning. The organ music swelled, whispers rippled through the crowd. She caught fragments of conversation. Poor girl. Doesn't even know. Vale finally paid his debts. Paid his debts. The words punched through her chest like shrapnel. Seraphina twisted toward her father, panic rising hot and sharp. "What did you do?" Thomas Vale didn't look at her. Sweat beaded across his forehead despite the cold cathedral air. His jaw worked like he was chewing glass. "Keep walking." "Dad," her voice cracked. "What did you do?" "I saved your life." The words came out strangled, desperate. "Now shut up and do what you're told." They reached the altar. Lucien Moretti stood 3 feet away, hands clasped behind his back, expression carved from granite. Up close, he looked even more dangerous, tall enough that Seraphina had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Scars on his knuckles, a slight bulge under his left shoulder. A gun, probably, because men like him never went unarmed. He studied her the way someone might study a painting before deciding whether to burn it. "Miss Vale." His voice rolled out low and smooth, the kind of voice that belonged to confessionals and last rites. Italian accent wrapped around English vowels. "You look confused." "I am confused." Seraphina's hands shook. She clenched them into fists, nails biting into her palms. "I don't know what I'm doing here." Lucian's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Your father didn't tell you." Tell me what? That you're getting married today. The cathedral tilted sideways. Blood roared in Seraphina's ears. She looked at her father, waiting for him to laugh, to explain the joke, to do literally anything except stand there staring at the floor like a coward. He said nothing. This is insane. Seraphina's voice climbed too high, echoing off vaulted ceilings. Heads turned, whispers multiplied. I'm not marrying anyone. I don't even know you. You don't need to know me. Lucien stepped closer. The movement was liquid, effortless, predatory. You just need to say yes when the officiant asks. And if I say no, his eyes flickered with something cold and final. Then your father dies. Right here, right now, in front of everyone. Seraphina's breath stopped. Lucien reached into his jacket. Several men in the front pews tensed, hands moving toward concealed weapons. But Lucien only pulled out a folded piece of paper. He opened it slowly, deliberately, and held it where Seraphina could see. Numbers, dates, signatures, debt records. Thomas Vale borrowed 3 million euros from my family over the past 8 years, Lucien said quietly. Gambling debts, business loans he never intended to repay, money he used to maintain the illusion that he wasn't drowning. He folded the paper and tucked it away. Last month, we informed him that payment was due. He couldn't pay, so we offered alternative terms. Seraphina's stomach turned to ice. Me? You? She looked at her father, really looked at him, saw the hollow eyes, the trembling hands, the guilt etched into every line of his face. You sold me. Thomas Vale flinched like she'd struck him. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. The words ripped out of her, sharp and raw. You chose gambling. You chose lying. You chose to trade your daughter like livestock instead of facing consequences like a man. Seraphina, don't. She held up a shaking hand. Don't say my name. Don't apologize. Just tell me the truth. How long have you known? Silence. How long, Dad? 6 months. His voice broke. I've known for 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of dinners and conversations and pretending everything was fine while he negotiated the terms of selling his only child. Seraphina tasted bile. Rage and grief and disbelief tangled in her chest until she couldn't breathe. Lucien watched the exchange with detached interest, like a scientist observing rats in a maze. You need to decide, he said. Your father's life or your freedom. I don't have all day. Seraphina spun toward him. What kind of monster? The kind your uncle created. The words landed like a physical blow. Seraphina blinked. What? Lucien's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Something old and hungry and full of teeth. Your mother's brother, Matteo Ricci. Does that name mean anything to you? It did. Uncle Matteo. The man who disappeared when Seraphina was 9 years old. Her mother never talked about him. Never explained where he went or why. Just said he was gone and they shouldn't ask questions. He was a witness, Lucien continued. 15 years ago, he testified against my father in a federal case, gave detailed records, named names, sent half the Moretti organization to prison. His voice stayed calm, but violence simmered beneath every syllable. My father died 6 months later, shanked in a prison shower by men he used to call brothers. I was 12 years old when they handed me his belongings in a plastic bag. Seraphina's mouth went dry. I didn't know. No, you were just a child. Innocent. Lucien stepped closer, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes, close enough to feel heat radiating from his body. But your family destroyed mine, so now I'm rebuilding mine with yours, piece by piece, starting with you. This isn't justice. Seraphina's voice shook. This is revenge. Yes. No hesitation, no shame. It is. The cathedral pressed in from all sides. Seraphina looked around desperately, at the crowd watching with cold curiosity, at her father crumbling beside her, at the officiant standing behind the altar with a Bible and a bored expression. No exits, no escape routes, no heroes coming to save her, just a choice between two kinds of death. She could refuse. Let her father pay the price for his sins. Walk away free and spend the rest of her life knowing she chose herself over him. Or she could surrender. Marry a monster. Become collateral in someone else's war. Thunder cracked overhead. Rain hammered harder against stained glass. Seraphina closed her eyes and felt everything she'd ever been, art student, daughter, dreamer, drain out of her like water through broken fingers. When she opened her eyes, Lucien was still watching. "If I say yes," Seraphina whispered, "what happens to me?" "You become my wife. You live in my house. You follow my rules." He paused. "And you never see your father again." "What?" "Part of the agreement." Lucien's tone stayed flat, businesslike. "Thomas Vale walks out of this cathedral alive, but he forfeits all contact with you. Forever. No letters, no phone calls, no accidental meetings. If he breaks that condition, I kill him anyway." Seraphina looked at her father. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "You knew about this too," she said. Not a question, a realization. Thomas Vale nodded once. Tears streaked his cheeks. "I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this." "I know." The officiant cleared his throat. "Mr. Moretti, shall we proceed?" Lucien raised one hand. "Wait." He studied Seraphina for a long moment, reading her the way someone might read a contract before signing. "Last chance, Miss Vale, yes or no? Choose now." Seraphina thought about running, bolting down the aisle, throwing herself through one of those stained glass windows, and hoping the fall killed her before Lucien's men caught up. But her legs felt like concrete. Her body had already given up, even if her mind hadn't. She looked at Lucien Moretti, the ghost, the monster, the man who'd built an empire on blood and bones, and made the only choice left. "Yes." The word came out barely louder than a breath, but it was enough. Lucien nodded once, satisfied, final. He turned to the officiant. "Begin." What followed felt like drowning in slow motion. The officiant spoke words Seraphina didn't hear. Lucien produced a ring from his pocket. White gold, simple, cold. He slid it onto her finger without ceremony. When the officiant asked if she took Lucien Moretti as her lawfully wedded husband, she heard herself say yes again, the words scraping her throat raw. No one asked if she did so willingly. No one objected. When the officiant declared them married, Lucien leaned in and pressed a brief, clinical kiss to Seraphina's mouth. His lips were warm. His hand on her waist was steady. The kiss lasted 3 seconds and felt like drowning. Applause erupted through the cathedral. Seraphina stood frozen as people rose from their seats, clapping politely, murmuring congratulations like this was a normal wedding instead of a hostage situation wrapped in white silk. Cameras flashed. Someone popped champagne. Men in expensive suits lined up to shake Lucien's hand while their wives studied Seraphina with calculating eyes. Thomas Vale slipped out a side door without saying goodbye. Seraphina watched him go. Felt something vital inside her chest crack clean through. Lucien's hand settled on her lower back. "Smile," he said quietly. "You're a bride. Act like one." She wanted to scream, wanted to claw his eyes out, wanted to burn the entire cathedral down with everyone inside it. Instead, she smiled. A horrible, brittle thing that felt like shattered glass. For the next hour, Seraphina stood beside her new husband and played the role she'd been given. Shook hands, accepted congratulations, listened to politicians and crime lords praise the union like it was something beautiful instead of something monstrous. Lucien never left her side. Not when a silver-haired man named Matteo De Luca cornered them to discuss territory disputes. Not when a woman dripping in emeralds asked Seraphina where she'd bought her dress. Not when the photographer demanded they pose together beneath the stained glass saints. He watched her, always watching, like she might bolt if he looked away for even a second. Maybe she would. Finally, mercifully, the reception ended. Guests filtered out into the rain. Lucien guided Seraphina toward the cathedral's side entrance where a black car waited, sleek, expensive, windows tinted dark enough to hide bodies. A man in a suit opened the back door. Lucien gestured. "Get in." Seraphina hesitated. This was it. The moment she crossed from captive to prisoner. Once she got in that car, there was no coming back. Now, Seraphina. The way he said her name, calm, certain, like he owned it now, sent ice down her spine. She climbed into the car. Lucien slid in beside her. The door closed with a heavy, final thunk. The driver pulled away from the cathedral. Rome blurred past the windows, rain-slicked streets, ancient architecture lit by street lamps. Normal people living normal lives, oblivious to the fact that somewhere in this city, a woman had just been sold like property. Seraphina stared at her hands. The ring on her finger caught the light, white gold gleaming against her skin like a shackle. "Where are we going?" Her voice came out hollow. "Home?" Lucien unbuttoned his jacket and leaned back against the leather seat. "My home. Your home now." "I don't have a home anymore." "No." He glanced at her. "You don't." They drove in silence for 15 minutes. The city gave way to estates, high walls, gated properties, old money and older secrets. Eventually, the car turned onto a private road lined with cypress trees, climbing toward a sprawling villa perched on a hillside. Even through rain and darkness, the place looked like a fortress. 3 stories of cream-colored stone, arched windows, terracotta roof tiles, gardens that probably looked beautiful in daylight, but now just looked like shadows and thorns. Armed guards stood at the entrance gate. They waved the car through without question. The villa loomed larger as they approached. Seraphina's chest tightened. This was real. This was happening. In a few minutes, she'd be inside that house with a man who saw her as a weapon instead of a person. The car stopped beneath a covered portico. The driver opened the door. Lucien got out first, then offered his hand to Seraphina. She ignored it and climbed out on her own. Rain drummed on the portico roof. Seraphina stood shivering in a ruined silk dress, staring at the massive wooden doors that marked the entrance. Somewhere inside, her new life waited, a life she hadn't chosen, a life built on revenge and debt and blood. Lucien moved past her and opened the doors himself. Warm light spilled out. Marble floors, high ceilings, a grand staircase sweeping upward into shadow. Oil paintings on the walls, saints and sinners, probably, because men like Lucien loved that kind of irony. "Come inside," he said. Not a request, a command. Seraphina didn't move. "What happens now?" "Now you live here. You follow my rules. You don't leave without permission." He paused. "And you remember that every day you breathe, your father stays alive because I allow it. You're a monster." "Yes." Lucien stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. "But I'm the monster keeping you alive. So you'll smile when I tell you to smile. You'll play the devoted wife when we're in public. And you'll remember that I could have killed you both in that cathedral." His voice dropped. "Be grateful I chose mercy." "This isn't mercy." "No." His eyes glittered. "It's revenge. And you're the sharpest weapon I've got." He turned and walked inside. Seraphina stood alone in the rain for another moment, feeling the weight of the ring on her finger, feeling the ghost of her old life slipping away like water, feeling everything she used to be dissolve into nothing. Then she took a breath, straightened her spine, and walked through the doors into her new prison. The entrance hall stretched impossibly wide. Black and white marble floors gleamed under chandelier light. The staircase split in 2 directions at the top, leading deeper into the villa's sprawling interior. Doors lined the walls, closed, locked, hiding whatever secrets rich men kept behind expensive wood. A woman appeared from a side hallway, mid-50s, gray hair pulled into a tight bun, wearing a black dress and a practiced smile. "Mrs. Moretti, welcome home." The name hit like a slap. Mrs. Moretti. Seraphina Vale didn't exist anymore. "This is Elena," Lucien said. "She manages the household. Anything you need, ask her." Elena's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Your room is ready. Would you like me to show you upstairs?" "Her room is the East Wing suite," Lucien said before Seraphina could answer. "Second floor. Make sure she has everything." "Of course, sir." Seraphina blinked. "Separate rooms?" Lucien looked at her like she'd asked something stupid. "Did you think we'd share a bed?" She didn't know what she'd thought. Hadn't gotten that far in processing the nightmare. "No." "Good. I don't need a wife in my bed. I need a wife in my house." He started toward one of the closed doors. "Elena will show you around. Don't wander. Don't touch anything valuable. Don't try to leave." "And if I do?" He paused, glanced back over his shoulder. "Then you'll learn very quickly why people call me the ghost." The door closed behind him with a quiet click. Elena smiled again. That same empty, professional smile. Shall we? Seraphina followed her up the staircase. Her legs felt numb. Her mind felt numb. Everything felt like a dream she couldn't wake up from. The second floor opened into a wide corridor lined with closed doors. Paintings hung on the walls, landscapes, portraits, abstract shapes that probably cost more than most people made in a year. Elena led her past all of them to a door at the far end. Your suite, Elena said, opening it. The room beyond was obscenely beautiful. King-sized bed with silk sheets. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens. A sitting area with velvet furniture. A bathroom larger than Seraphina's entire apartment back home. Marble counters, a shower big enough for 3 people, a tub deep enough to drown in. It looked like a 5-star hotel room. It felt like a cell. Your belongings will arrive tomorrow, Elena said. Mr. Moretti had someone collect them from your apartment. Of course he did. Efficient, thorough. Already erasing her old life before she'd even finished processing it. If you need anything, I won't. Seraphina's voice came out flat. Thank you. Elena hesitated. For just a second, something that might have been sympathy flickered across her face. Then it was gone. Breakfast is at 8, dinner at 7. Don't be late. She left, closing the door behind her. Seraphina stood alone in the center of the room, still wearing her ruined wedding dress. Rain pelted the windows. Thunder rolled somewhere over Rome's sleeping rooftops. She walked to the window and pressed her forehead against the cold glass. Below, the gardens stretched dark and endless. Guards patrolled the perimeter with flashlights and dogs. High walls ringed the entire property. No way out, no escape. Seraphina closed her eyes. Thought about her father. Thought about Uncle Matteo. Thought about the man downstairs who'd turned her into a living weapon of revenge. And for the first time since the cathedral, she let herself cry. Quiet, shaking sobs that ripped through her chest like knives. She cried for the life she'd lost, for the future she'd never have, for the girl she used to be, gone now, buried beneath silk and gold and violence. When the tears finally stopped, Seraphina opened her eyes and stared at her reflection in the window glass. A stranger stared back. Mrs. Lucien Moretti, the ghost's wife, a weapon wrapped in white. She didn't recognize herself anymore. And somewhere deep in the villa, she heard a door close. Footsteps moving through marble halls. The sound of a man who'd gotten exactly what he wanted. Seraphina pressed her palm flat against the window and made a promise to the stranger in the glass. She would survive this. She would find a way to fight back. And someday, somehow, Lucien Moretti would regret the day he decided to make her his weapon. Because weapons had a way of turning on their masters. And revenge cut both ways. Seraphina woke to sunlight cutting through unfamiliar windows. For 3 perfect seconds, she forgot where she was. Forgot the cathedral. Forgot the ring on her finger. Then memory crashed back like a fist to the chest and she remembered everything. Married, prisoner, weapon. She sat up slowly, muscles aching from a night spent curled on top of the silk sheets, still wearing her ruined wedding dress. The fabric had dried stiff against her skin, creased and wrinkled. Her hair hung in tangled waves. She looked like something dragged from a shipwreck. A clock on the nightstand read 7:47 a.m. 13 minutes until breakfast. Seraphina peeled herself out of the dress and stumbled toward the bathroom. The shower was massive, all glass and chrome, with water pressure that felt like punishment. She stood under scalding heat until her skin turned red, scrubbing away yesterday's nightmare inch by inch. It didn't work. When she finally stepped out, wrapped in a towel that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe back home, she found her belongings had arrived. Suitcases stacked neatly in the corner, her clothes hanging in the closet, her sketchbooks and art supplies arranged on a desk by the window. Efficient, clinical, like she'd always lived here. Seraphina pulled on jeans and a sweater, twisted her wet hair into a knot, and stared at herself in the mirror. Dark circles under her eyes, pale skin, a stranger wearing her face. Mrs. Moretti stared back. At exactly 8 o'clock, someone knocked on the door. Mrs. Moretti! Elena's voice muffled through wood. Breakfast is ready. Seraphina considered ignoring her, considered barricading herself inside and forcing them to drag her out. But hunger gnawed at her stomach, and rebellion on an empty stomach felt stupid. She opened the door. Elena smiled that same professional smile. This way, please. They descended the grand staircase and wound through marble hallways until they reached a dining room that could have seated 20 people. Long wooden table, high-backed chairs, windows overlooking the gardens, which looked less menacing in daylight, manicured hedges, stone fountains, roses blooming despite the season. Lucien sat at the head of the table reading a newspaper. He'd changed from yesterday's suit into dark slacks and a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Morning light caught the scar on his cheekbone. He looked up when Seraphina entered, dark eyes tracking her movement across the room. "Sit." He gestured to the chair at his right. Seraphina sat. A woman in a white apron appeared with coffee and pastries and eggs, prepared 3 different ways. She set everything on the table without making eye contact and disappeared back into the kitchen. Lucien folded his newspaper. "How did you sleep?" "Terribly." Seraphina reached for the coffee. "How did you sleep?" "Fine." "Good for you." His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "You'll get used to it." "To what? Being a hostage?" "To being my wife." Seraphina wrapped both hands around the coffee cup, letting heat seep into her palms. "There's a difference?" Lucien studied her for a long moment. Then he picked up his own coffee and took a slow sip. "You have spirit." "That's good. I was worried you'd be broken already." "Sorry to disappoint." "You misunderstand." He set the cup down. "I prefer you with spirit. Broken things bore me." The words landed cold and sharp. Seraphina met his gaze across the table, searching for humanity behind those black eyes. Found nothing but calculation. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you live here. Attend events with me when necessary. Smile for cameras. Play the role you were bought for. And between those performances, you do whatever you want. Paint, read, walk the gardens." He paused. "Within limits." "What limits?" "You don't leave the property without me. You don't contact your father. You don't speak to journalists." Lucien leaned back in his chair. "And you don't embarrass me in public." Seraphina's grip tightened on the coffee cup. "So I'm a doll. Something you dress up and parade around when convenient." "Essentially." The casual cruelty of it stole her breath. She set the cup down carefully before she threw it. "You're a monster." "We established that yesterday." Lucien picked up a knife and began spreading jam on a pastry. The motion was precise, controlled. "Any other observations?" "Yeah. You're also a coward." The knife stilled. Silence dropped over the dining room like a heavy curtain. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked. Outside, birds sang. Seraphina felt her pulse hammering in her throat, but she didn't look away. Lucien set the knife down slowly. "Explain." "You hide behind revenge. Use it to justify turning into the same kind of animal that destroyed your family." Seraphina's voice shook, but she pushed forward. "My uncle betrayed your father. Fine. That's between you and him. But you couldn't face him directly, could you? So instead you punish me. A stranger. Someone who had nothing to do with what happened to you. You're his blood. That doesn't make me guilty. It makes you connected." Lucien's expression stayed calm, but something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. "Your family took mine. So I take yours. It's symmetry. It's cowardice." The word hung in the air between them like a thrown blade. Lucien rose from his chair, slowly, deliberately. He walked around the table until he stood directly behind Seraphina's chair. She felt him there, solid, lethal, close enough to snap her neck if he wanted. His hand settled on her shoulder, not hard, not squeezing, just resting there with terrifying casualty. "Let me be very clear," he said quietly. "You can hate me, you can curse me, you can wish me dead every second of every day, but you will never call me a coward again. Understood?" Seraphina's entire body tensed. Every instinct screamed at her to apologize, to back down, to remember that this man held her life in his hands. But something deeper, some stubborn, furious part of herself she thought had died in the cathedral, refused to give him the satisfaction. "Or what?" she whispered. Lucien's fingers tightened slightly. "Or you learn why my enemies don't make that mistake twice." He released her shoulder and walked toward the door, paused in the doorway without turning around. "There's a gala tonight. Elena will help you prepare. Wear something appropriate." Then he was gone. Seraphina sat frozen at the table, heart slamming against her ribs. Her shoulders still tingled where he'd touched her. She wanted to scream, wanted to flip the entire table, wanted to burn this house down with both of them inside it. Instead, she poured herself more coffee and tried to stop her hands from shaking. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of exploration and surveillance. Seraphina wandered the villa like a ghost haunting its own prison, discovered a library with floor-to-ceiling books, most in Italian, some in English, found a music room with a grand piano covered in dust, counted 6 locked doors she wasn't supposed to open, watched guards patrol the gardens through the windows, noted exit points, camera placements, weaknesses in the perimeter. Not because she planned to escape, because cataloging the prison made it feel less suffocating. Around noon, Elena found her in the library staring at a painting of the Roman countryside. "Mrs. Moretti, we should discuss tonight's event." Seraphina didn't turn around. "Do I have a choice?" "No." "Then there's nothing to discuss." Elena moved to stand beside her. Up close, the older woman smelled like lavender and cigarettes. "This isn't easy for you. I understand that." "Do you?" "I've been with the Moretti family for 23 years. I've seen many difficult things." Elena's voice softened slightly. "Mr. Moretti is complicated, but he's not as cruel as you think." Seraphina finally looked at her. "He bought me, like property." "He bought your father's debt. That's different." "How?" Elena didn't answer, just studied Seraphina with eyes that had witnessed too much to shock easily. "The gala tonight is important. Politicians, business leaders, other families, everyone will be watching to see how you perform." "You mean how well I play the devoted wife?" "Yes." "What if I don't?" "Then Mr. Moretti will be displeased." Elena's expression hardened. "And when he's displeased, people suffer. Not just you. Your father, people you've never met. He has a long reach and a longer memory." The threat landed cold and clear. Seraphina turned back to the painting. "What time do I need to be ready?" 7 o'clock. "I'll bring options for dresses." Elena left. Seraphina stood alone in the library, staring at painted hills and vineyards, wondering if the artist who created this had been free or just another kind of prisoner. 7 o'clock arrived too quickly. Elena appeared with 3 dresses draped over her arm. Black, red, emerald green. All designer, all expensive, all chosen to make Seraphina look like something valuable. "The red," Elena suggested. "It will photograph well." Seraphina chose the black instead. Floor length, long sleeves, high neckline. It covered everything, revealed nothing, and felt like armor. Elena helped her with hair and makeup, pinned dark waves into an elegant twist, applied lipstick the color of dried blood, fastened a diamond necklace around her throat that felt like a collar. When she finally looked in the mirror, Seraphina saw a stranger again. Beautiful. Polished. Empty. Mrs. Moretti. A knock on the door, Lucien's voice. "We're leaving in 5 minutes." Seraphina took a breath, straightened her spine, opened the door. Lucien stood in the hallway wearing a black tuxedo that probably cost more than her college tuition. His hair was slicked back. The scar on his cheek seemed more prominent under the chandelier light. He looked like every dangerous fantasy wrapped in expensive fabric. His eyes swept over her once. "You look acceptable." "How flattering." "It wasn't meant to flatter, it was an assessment." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" Seraphina stared at his arm like it might bite her. Then she looped her hand through it because she didn't have a choice. They descended the staircase together. The car waited outside. Same black vehicle from yesterday. Same tinted windows. Same suffocating silence. They drove through Rome as evening fell. Streetlights flickered on. Couples walked hand in hand. Normal people living normal lives. Seraphina watched them disappear past the window and wondered if she'd ever be normal again. The gala took place in a restored palazzo near the city center. Marble columns, frescoed ceilings, chandeliers dripping crystal. The kind of place that reeked of old money and older secrets. Cameras flashed as they arrived. Lucien's hand settled on Seraphina's lower back, steering her through the entrance. Photographers shouted questions in Italian. She caught fragments. "Who is she?" "When did you marry?" "Will there be children?" Lucien ignored all of them. Inside, the ballroom stretched impossibly large. Hundreds of people milled about in evening wear, drinking champagne, pretending to care about art or charity or whatever wealthy people pretended to care about. Seraphina recognized faces from yesterday's cathedral: politicians, crime lords, their decorative wives. All of them turned to stare when Lucien and Seraphina entered. "Smile," Lucien murmured against her ear. "You're on stage." Seraphina smiled. That same brittle, shattered thing from yesterday. For the next hour, she played her role perfectly. Shook hands with men whose names she immediately forgot. Accepted congratulations from women who looked at her like a lamb being led to slaughter. Let Lucien parade her around the ballroom like a trophy, while conversation swirled around her in Italian and English. Most people spoke to Lucien and ignored her completely. But not everyone. A silver-haired man intercepted them near the bar. Expensive suit, cold eyes, smile sharp enough to cut. "Lucien, congratulations on your marriage." Lucien's expression didn't change. "Matteo, always a pleasure." Matteo De Luca. Seraphina remembered him from the cathedral, one of the crime lords who'd toasted the Union. And this must be the famous Seraphina Vale. De Luca's gaze slid over her like oil. Such a beautiful addition to the family. "Seraphina Moretti," Lucien corrected. "She's mine now." The possessiveness in those words made Seraphina's stomach turn. De Luca smiled wider. "Of course. Moretti. My apologies." He lifted his champagne glass. "To young love." "To business arrangements," Lucien replied coolly. They toasted. De Luca drank. His eyes never left Seraphina's face. "Tell me, Mrs. Moretti," De Luca said, "how are you adjusting to married life?" Seraphina felt Lucien's hand tighten on her waist. A warning. She smiled anyway. "It's been enlightening. I'm sure. Lucien is quite the catch, so powerful, so dedicated to his work." De Luca leaned closer. "I hope he's treating you well." "He's treating me exactly as expected." Something flickered in De Luca's expression. Amusement, maybe, or recognition. He glanced at Lucien. "She has spirit. That must be refreshing for you." "Refreshing isn't the word I'd use," Lucien said flatly. "No?" De Luca chuckled. "Well, if you ever tire of her, let me know. I could always use someone with such fire." The threat underneath the joke was clear. Lucien's entire body went still. When he spoke, his voice dropped to something cold and lethal. "Careful, Matteo. My wife isn't a commodity to be traded." "Of course not." De Luca raised his hands in mock surrender. "Just admiring. No harm intended." "Good. Because harm toward what's mine ends badly for everyone involved." The two men stared at each other. Some silent battle Seraphina didn't understand played out between them. Finally, De Luca nodded once and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Lucien's grip on Seraphina's waist loosened slightly. "What was that about?" she asked. "Politics?" "That wasn't politics. That was a threat." "Same thing." Lucien steered her toward the dance floor. "Come. We need to be seen together." "I don't want to dance with you." "I don't care what you want." He pulled her onto the floor before she could protest. One hand settled at her waist, the other captured hers. Music swelled around them, something classical, strings and piano. Other couples waltzed past in perfect synchronization. Seraphina stood rigid in Lucien's arms. "Relax," he said. "You look like you're being tortured." "Aren't I?" His mouth twitched. "If this is torture, you have a very limited imagination." "I'm sure you can teach me all about torture. You seem experienced." "I am." He pulled her closer, moving them through the steps with practiced ease. "But tonight isn't about pain, it's about performance. Everyone in this room is watching us right now. They're trying to see cracks, weakness, signs that I've made a mistake bringing you into my world." "Have you?" Lucien's dark eyes met hers. "I don't make mistakes." They turned through the music. Seraphina felt the weight of hundreds of eyes boring into her back. Cameras flashed from the edges of the ballroom. She wanted to break away, wanted to scream, wanted to tell everyone watching that this was a lie wrapped in silk and diamonds. Instead, she let Lucien lead, let him move her across the floor like a puppet on strings, let herself disappear into the role she'd been given because fighting in public would only make everything worse. The song ended. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Lucien released her and stepped back, but his hand remained possessively on her lower back. "Well done," he murmured. "You're learning." Seraphina wanted to tell him exactly where he could shove his approval, but another man approached before she could speak. This one was younger, early 30s, handsome in a conventional way, styled hair, perfect teeth, designer suit. He smiled warmly at both of them. "Lucien, what a beautiful wedding yesterday. Congratulations." "Marco." Lucien's voice stayed neutral. "Thank you for attending." "Wouldn't miss it." Marco turned to Seraphina. "And you must be the infamous bride. I'm Marco Santini. Lucien and I go way back." He offered his hand. Seraphina shook it automatically. "Pleasure," she said, because what else could she say? Marco held her hand a fraction too long. "The pleasure is mine. Truly. You're even lovelier than the photograph suggested." Lucien's expression darkened. "Marco." "What?" "I'm being friendly." Marco finally released Seraphina's hand. "Your wife is stunning. You should accept compliments with more grace." "I accept compliments. I don't accept you fucking my wife in public." The words cut through the air like a blade. Several nearby conversations stuttered to a halt. Marco's smile faltered. "That's inappropriate, Lucien. I was simply—" "I know what you were doing." Lucien moved between Marco and Seraphina, blocking her from view. "Do it again, and we're going to have a problem." Marco raised both hands. "No problem. No problem at all. Just trying to welcome her to the family." "She's welcomed. Now go." Marco's smile turned brittle. He nodded once, shot Seraphina a look she couldn't quite read, and melted back into the crowd. Seraphina stared at Lucien's back. "Was that necessary?" "Yes. I can handle compliments." "That wasn't a compliment." Lucien turned to face her. "That was Marco testing boundaries, seeing how far he could push before I reacted. And you gave him exactly what he wanted. A reaction." "No, I gave him a warning." Lucien's jaw tightened. Men like Marco operate through charm and manipulation. They smile while planning betrayal. I don't trust him, and neither should you. I don't trust anyone in this room, including you. Smart girl. They stood in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by music and laughter and predators in evening wear. Seraphina felt exhaustion creeping through her bones. This performance was draining. Every smile, every polite word, every second pretending to be something she wasn't. "Can we leave?" she asked quietly. Lucien checked his watch. "1 more hour." "I don't think I can do 1 more hour." "You can." He caught her chin gently, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. The gesture looked tender from a distance. Up close, his eyes were hard. "You're stronger than you think, and weaker people than you have survived worse." Is that supposed to be encouraging? It's supposed to be true. He released her and guided her back into the crowd. The next hour crawled past like broken glass dragged across skin. Seraphina smiled until her face ached, made small talk with strangers who looked at her like a curiosity, drank champagne that tasted like expensive lies, let Lucien steer her through conversations she didn't care about with people she'd never see again. Finally, mercifully, Lucien said they could leave. The car ride home passed in silence. Seraphina stared out the window, watching Rome blur into darkness. Her feet hurt, her head hurt, everything hurt. When they arrived back at the villa, Lucien walked her to the base of the staircase. "You did well tonight," he said. "I'm overwhelmed by your praise." His mouth curved slightly, almost a smile, almost human. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be easier." "Will it?" "No, but lying makes goodbyes less awkward." He turned and walked toward his study, leaving Seraphina alone in the entrance hall. She climbed the stairs slowly. Every step felt like carrying weight she wasn't built to hold. When she finally reached her room, she peeled off the black dress, scrubbed the makeup from her face, and collapsed onto the bed in her underwear. Sleep didn't come. She lay in darkness, staring at the ceiling, replaying the night in her head. DeLuca's threat, Marco's smile, Lucien's possessive hand at her waist, the constant performance, the suffocating weight of being watched. Around 3 a.m., Seraphina gave up on sleep. She pulled on sweatpants and a hoodie and padded downstairs barefoot. The villa was dark except for emergency lighting along the hallways. Somewhere in the distance, she heard guards talking quietly. She found the library and curled up in a leather chair near the window. Moonlight streamed through the glass. The gardens looked peaceful, deceptive. Seraphina pulled one of her sketchbooks from where she'd hidden it earlier and began drawing. She didn't plan what emerged. Her hands just moved across paper, lines and shadows forming without conscious thought. Cages, windows with bars, hands pressed against glass. A woman's face half hidden in darkness. Herself, trapped. She drew until her fingers cramped and dawn light started bleeding across the horizon. That's when she heard footsteps. Seraphina looked up to find Lucien standing in the doorway, wearing dark slacks and an untucked white shirt. His hair was disheveled. He looked like he hadn't slept either. They stared at each other across the library. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "No, neither could I." Lucien crossed the room and sat in the chair opposite hers. He glanced at the sketchbook in her lap. "What are you drawing?" Seraphina considered lying, considered closing the book. But exhaustion had stripped away her ability to care. She held it up so he could see. Lucien studied the drawing for a long moment. His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. "You're talented," he said quietly. "Thank you." "Why cages? Why do you think?" He leaned back in his chair. "You feel trapped." "I am trapped." "Yes." No apology, no platitude, just agreement. "You are." Silence settled between them. Not comfortable, but not actively hostile either. Just two people sitting in pre-dawn darkness, too tired to perform anymore. "Can I ask you something?" Seraphina said. "You can ask. I may not answer." "Was it worth it?" Lucien's brow furrowed. "Was what worth it?" "This. Revenge. Buying me. Rebuilding your empire through blood and fear." She gestured vaguely at the villa around them. "Was any of it worth what you lost?" The question hung in the air. Lucien was quiet for so long Seraphina thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know." The honesty shocked her. "My father died when I was 12, Lucien continued, still staring out the window. "They gave me his belongings in a plastic bag. Wedding ring, watch, wallet with 40 euros. That's what his life amounted to. 40 euros and revenge that took 15 years to plan." He finally looked at her. "So yes, it had to be worth it. Because if it wasn't, then I wasted my entire life on nothing." Seraphina felt something crack in her chest. Not sympathy exactly, but understanding. The terrible realization that Lucien was just as trapped as she was. Not by walls or guards, but by the weight of his own choices. "You're still wasting it," she said softly. "Maybe. You could stop. Let it go. Choose something different." "Could I?" Lucien's voice hardened. "Your uncle destroyed my family. Your father owed me 3 million euros. The entire underworld was watching to see if I'd enforce my debts or go soft. What choice did I have?" "You always have a choice. Easy to say when you're 24 and your biggest decision was what color to paint with." He stood abruptly. "You don't know what it takes to survive in this world. What compromises have to be made. What sacrifices are necessary." "Then teach me." The words came out before Seraphina could stop them. Lucien froze. "What? You want me to understand? Then teach me. Show me your world instead of just trapping me in it." Seraphina rose from her chair, clutching the sketchbook against her chest. "You said I'm your weapon. Fine. Weapons need to understand what they're fighting for." Lucien studied her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "You're asking to see the violence, the ugliness, the parts of my life that would break most people." "I'm already broken. What's a little more damage?" Something almost like respect flickered across his face. "You're serious?" "Completely." They stood 3 feet apart in the library, dawn light painting everything pale gold. For the first time since the cathedral, Lucien looked at Seraphina like she might be more than just collateral. "All right," he said finally. "I'll show you. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Understood?" "Understood." Lucien turned and walked toward the door, paused in the doorway without looking back. "Get dressed. We leave in 20 minutes." "Where are we going?" "Somewhere that will answer your questions better than words ever could." Then he was gone. Seraphina stood alone in the library, heart hammering. She'd just made a decision that would change everything. She could feel it. Some line had been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. She hurried upstairs, threw on jeans and boots, pulled her hair into a ponytail. When she came back down, Lucien was waiting in the entrance hall wearing dark clothes and a leather jacket. They drove through Rome as the city woke. Street vendors setting up, delivery trucks rumbling past, morning commuters stumbling toward their normal, safe lives. Lucien drove himself this time. No driver, no guards, just the two of them in the car speeding towards something Seraphina couldn't name. They left the city center and wound through industrial districts, warehouses, loading docks, places where people disappeared and no one asked questions. Finally, Lucien pulled into an abandoned factory complex and killed the engine. "Stay close," he said. "Don't speak unless I tell you to. Don't touch anything. Understood?" Seraphina nodded. They got out of the car. The factory loomed ahead. Rusted metal, shattered windows, graffiti covering every surface. Lucien led her through a side entrance and down a concrete hallway lit by flickering fluorescent lights. Voices echoed from somewhere ahead. Lucien pushed through a heavy door. The room beyond was large and cold. Concrete floors, metal support beams, a single bulb hanging from the ceiling casting harsh shadows. And in the center, tied to a chair, sat a man, mid-40s, balding, bloodied face, terrified eyes. 3 of Lucien's men stood around him. They straightened when Lucien entered. "Boss," one of them said, "we've been questioning him like you asked." Lucien nodded. He moved toward the bound man slowly, deliberately. Seraphina stayed frozen by the door, pulse hammering in her throat. "Mr. Russo," Lucien said calmly, "have you thought about my offer?" The man in the chair spat blood onto the floor. "Fuck you, Moretti." Lucien sighed. "That's disappointing." He glanced at one of his men. "Marco said Russo here has been skimming profits from our shipments for 6 months. 15,000 euros. Gone." "It wasn't," Russo started. Lucien backhanded him across the face. The sound cracked through the warehouse like a gunshot. Russo's head snapped sideways. Blood sprayed from his mouth. Seraphina flinched. Lucien didn't even look winded. He grabbed Russo's chin and forced the man to look at him. "I'll ask one more time. Where's my money?" "I don't have it." "Then who does?" "I spent it. It's gone." Lucien released his chin and stepped back. He pulled a gun from inside his jacket. Black metal, cold and efficient. Chambered around with a sound that echoed through the warehouse. Seraphina's stomach turned to ice. "Wait," Russo gasped. "Wait, please." Lucien pressed the gun against the man's kneecap. "You stole from me, disrespected me, made me look weak in front of my organization." His voice stayed calm, casual. "I can't let that slide, you understand? Please, I have kids. A wife, please." "So did my father." Lucien's finger moved to the trigger. "And your mercy didn't save him." He fired. The gunshot exploded through the warehouse. Russo screamed. Seraphina's vision blurred. She pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting the urge to vomit. Lucien had shot him. Actually shot him. Blood pooled beneath the chair, spreading across concrete. Russo sobbed, face contorted in agony. "Please, God, please." Lucien crouched in front of him, gun dangling casually from his fingers. "Tell me where the money is. Last chance." "Storage unit," Russo gasped the words between screams. "Unit 47, West District. The key's in my apartment. Please, don't kill me." Lucien stood, nodded to one of his men. "Check it. If he's lying, bring me his wife." "No!" Russo thrashed against the ropes. "No, I'm not lying. I swear, the money's there." Lucien ignored him. He walked back towards Seraphina, who stood frozen against the wall, face pale, eyes wide with shock. He stopped in front of her. "Now you understand." Seraphina couldn't speak, couldn't move. The smell of blood and gunpowder filled her lungs. "This is my world," Lucien said quietly. "Violence, fear, control. This is what it takes to keep power in Rome. This is what I do." He tilted his head slightly. "Still want to understand?" Seraphina forced herself to meet his eyes, forced herself not to look away, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. Yes, she whispered. Something shifted in Lucien's expression. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. He gestured toward the door. Come. We're done here. They walked back through the warehouse. Behind them, Russo's sobs echoed off concrete walls. Seraphina's legs shook. Her hands trembled. She tasted bile in the back of her throat. Outside, cold morning air hit her like a slap. Seraphina bent over and vomited into the weeds beside the factory. Lucien stood behind her, waiting patiently until she finished. Then he handed her a handkerchief. First time witnessing violence? He asked. Seraphina wiped her mouth. Yes. It gets easier. I don't want it to get easier. Lucien studied her for a long moment. Then he walked to the car and opened the passenger door. Get in. I'll take you home. Seraphina climbed in, still shaking. They drove back through Rome in silence. Seraphina stared out the window, seeing nothing. The image of Russo's shattered knee kept replaying in her head. The sound of the gunshot, the smell of blood. This was Lucien's world. This was what she'd married into. When they finally reached the villa, Lucien killed the engine but didn't move to get out. You wanted to understand, he said quietly. Now you do. Seraphina turned to look at him. Really look at him. Saw the monster and the man twisted together so tightly she couldn't separate them anymore. Why did you show me that? She asked. Because you asked. No, really, why? Lucien was quiet for a moment. Then, because you deserve to know what kind of man you're trapped with. What I'm capable of. What I'll do to protect what's mine. His dark eyes met hers. Including you. The words landed with unexpected weight. I'm not yours, Seraphina said. Yes, you are. No anger, just statement of fact. Whether you like it or not. And if anyone tries to hurt you, I'll do to them what I did to Russo. Worse, probably. Because you're part of my world now, part of my empire, and I protect what belongs to me. Seraphina should have been terrified, should have recoiled from the possessiveness in his voice. But instead, she felt something else, something complicated and dangerous that she didn't have words for yet. I need to think, she said finally. Think all you want. It won't change anything. Seraphina got out of the car and walked into the villa without looking back. She climbed the stairs to her room, locked the door, stripped off her blood-stained boots, and collapsed onto the bed. And for the first time since the cathedral, she understood the terrible truth. Lucien Moretti was a monster, but he was also the only thing standing between her and a world even more violent than him. And that realization terrified her more than anything else. Because somewhere between the warehouse and the villa, between the gunshot and the silence, Seraphina had stopped seeing Lucien as just her captor. She'd started seeing him as something far more dangerous, a man instead of a monster. And men could be understood. Men could be changed. Men could be... The thought died before it finished forming. Seraphina pressed her hands to her face and tried not to think about the way Lucien had looked at her in the warehouse, the way he'd said she belonged to him, the way some broken part of herself had almost believed it. Outside her window, guards patrolled the gardens. Inside, Seraphina felt the walls of her prison shift into something new, something infinitely more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. 3 weeks crawled past like broken glass dragged across skin. Seraphina learned the rhythms of her prison. Morning coffee with Lucien, where they spoke in clipped sentences about nothing important. Afternoons spent painting in her room while guards patrolled outside. Evenings at dinners or galas where she smiled until her face ached and played the devoted wife for audiences who didn't care if she was dying inside. The warehouse haunted her dreams. Every night she heard the gunshot, saw Russo's shattered knee, smelled blood mixed with concrete dust. She'd wake gasping, clutching silk sheets, trying to remember who she used to be before violence became routine. But something else was happening too, something she didn't have words for yet. Lucien had started watching her differently, not with the cold calculation of those first days, but with something closer to curiosity. He'd appear in doorways while she painted, silent as a ghost, just observing. He'd ask her opinion at dinner about books or music or politics, small things, meaningless things. But they accumulated like drops of water wearing down stone. And Seraphina found herself watching back, noticing details she'd missed before. the way Lucien's jaw tightened when someone challenged him in public. How he never drank more than one glass of wine at events, always staying alert. The faded scars on his knuckles from fights she'd never know about. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't paying attention, like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't add up. She hated him, but she was starting to understand him, and understanding felt more dangerous than hatred ever could. On the 23rd day of her captivity, everything changed. Seraphina woke to shouting downstairs. Male voices raised in anger. Something heavy crashed against a wall. She sat up fast, pulse hammering, and grabbed the first clothes she could find, sweatpants and a tank top. More shouting, closer now. She cracked open her door and peered into the hallway. Two of Lucien's men rushed past, faces grim, guns drawn. Elena appeared from the opposite direction, eyes wide. "Stay in your room," Elena hissed. "Lock the door." "What's happening?" "Just do it." Elena disappeared down the stairs. More voices erupted from below. Lucien's cutting through the chaos like a blade. Seraphina's stomach twisted. Every instinct screamed at her to lock herself away, to hide until the violence passed. Instead, she followed Elena downstairs. The entrance hall had transformed into a war room. A dozen men clustered near the doors, armed and tense. Lucien stood in the center wearing yesterday's clothes, hair disheveled, eyes burning with cold fury. He was shouting orders in rapid Italian at two men who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Then he saw Seraphina on the stairs. His expression darkened. "I told you to stay upstairs." "No one told me anything." Seraphina descended the rest of the way. "What's going on?" "Nothing that concerns you." "Everything in this house concerns me. I live here." One of Lucien's men muttered something in Italian. Lucien snapped at him without looking away from Seraphina. The man flinched and went quiet. "There was an incident," Lucien said finally. "A breach. We're handling it." "What kind of breach?" "The kind where people die if I don't move fast." He turned back to his men. "Get the cars ready. 5 minutes." The men scattered. Lucien started toward his study, but Seraphina caught his arm. He stopped, looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then at her face. "Let me come with you," she said. "Absolutely not." "You said I needed to understand your world. Let me see more of it." "Not today." Lucien pulled free from her grip. "Today is too dangerous." "Every day with you is dangerous." Something flickered across his face. Not quite amusement, not quite respect, something in between. "Fair point, but the answer is still no." He disappeared into his study. The door closed with a heavy click. Seraphina stood alone in the entrance hall, frustration burning through her chest. She'd spent 3 weeks suffocating in this gilded cage, playing by Lucien's rules, and now when something real was happening, he shoved her aside like a child. Fuck that. She turned and ran back upstairs, threw on jeans and boots, grabbed a dark jacket. When she came back down, the entrance hall was empty. She slipped out a side door and circled around to where the cars were parked. 4 black vehicles idled in the driveway, engines running. Lucien's men loaded weapons into trunks. No one noticed Seraphina as she crept toward the last car and slid into the back seat, crouching low behind the driver's seat. Footsteps approached. Doors opened and slammed. The car dipped as men climbed in. Then Lucien's voice, sharp and close. "Move! Now!" The convoy lurched forward. Seraphina held her breath, pressed against the floor, heart slamming against her ribs. If they found her now, Lucien would lose his mind. But something reckless and desperate had taken root inside her. Some need to prove she was more than decoration, more than collateral, more than a weapon that stayed locked away. They drove for 20 minutes, through the city, then into industrial sectors she didn't recognize. Finally, the car stopped. Doors opened. Men climbed out, speaking in low, urgent voices. Seraphina waited until footsteps faded, then carefully lifted her head. They'd parked outside a warehouse complex, similar to the place Lucien had taken her before, but larger, more desolate. Lucien and his men were already moving toward the main building, weapons drawn. Seraphina slipped out of the car and followed at a distance. The warehouse entrance gaped open like a wound. She crept inside, staying in the shadows, pulse hammering in her throat. Voices echoed from somewhere ahead. Not shouting. Not yet. But tension crackled through the air like electricity before a storm. She moved deeper into the building. found a metal staircase leading to a catwalk that ran along the upper level, climbed it slowly, boots silent on steel, until she reached a vantage point overlooking the main floor, and froze. Below, Lucien stood surrounded by his men. But they weren't alone. 20 feet away, another group waited. 7 men in dark clothes, weapons visible, forming a semicircle around someone Seraphina couldn't see clearly from this angle. Then the crowd shifted, and she saw him. Uncle Matteo. The air punched out of Seraphina's lungs. She gripped the catwalk railing hard enough to hurt, staring at the man she hadn't seen in 15 years. He looked older, thinner. Gray hair where there used to be black, but his face was unmistakable. Matteo Ricci, her mother's brother, the man who destroyed Lucien's family. "You made a mistake coming here," Lucien said, voice echoing through the warehouse. Matteo smiled, cold, sharp. "Did I? Last I checked, you've been hunting me for 15 years. Figured I'd save you the trouble." "How generous." "I'm a generous man." Matteo spread his hands. "That's why I'm here to offer you a deal." Lucien's expression didn't change. "I don't make deals with rats." "Not even when the rat has information you need?" Matteo's smile widened. "Information about your wife." Seraphina's blood turned to ice. Lucien went very still. "Explain." "Seraphina Vale. Beautiful girl. Talented artist. Innocent victim." Matteo's voice dripped mockery. "Or so you think. Get to the point before I shoot you where you stand." "The point, Lucien, is that your little bride isn't what she seems." Matteo pulled a folder from inside his jacket, held it up. "I've been watching her for years, watching her father, waiting for the right moment to use them both." "Use them for what?" "To destroy you." The words landed like grenades. Lucien took a step forward. His men tensed, fingers moving toward triggers. "You're lying." "Am I?" Matteo opened the folder. "Thomas Vale didn't gamble away 3 million euros. He never borrowed anything from you. The debt was fabricated, created by me. I fed your organization false records, fake signatures, made it look like Vale was drowning in debt, when really he was just a pathetic middle-class father trying to keep his head above water." Seraphina's stomach lurched. No, that wasn't possible. Her father had confessed to the debt, admitted everything. "You're insane," Lucien said flatly. "I'm thorough." Matteo pulled out photographs, held them up. "These are bank records. Real ones. Thomas Vale's actual finances. He's broke, yes, but not because of gambling. Because I've been systematically destroying his credit, his business, his reputation for 8 years. Setting him up to look guilty so you do exactly what you did. Take his daughter as payment." Lucien's hand moved to his gun. "Why?" "Because I knew you couldn't resist." Matteo's eyes glittered with vicious satisfaction. "You're predictable, Lucien. So focused on revenge that you didn't stop to verify your own intelligence. You trusted your organization's records without question, and I made sure those records told the story I wanted you to believe." "This is bullshit." "Is it? Then explain this." Matteo pulled out another photograph. This one showed Seraphina. Not recent, younger, maybe 17 years old. Standing outside a building Seraphina didn't recognize, talking to someone whose face was turned away from the camera. "Your wife met with me 6 months before you married her," Matteo said. "We had coffee, talked about art and family and the future. She had no idea who I was, of course. I introduced myself as an art dealer interested in her work. We stayed in touch, email, phone calls. I gave her advice, encouragement, built trust." Seraphina's hand shook. That wasn't true. She'd never met with any art dealer, never had those conversations. But even from this distance, she recognized herself in the photograph. That jacket, that hairstyle, that was her. "She's working with you," Lucien said slowly, each word sharp as broken glass. "Not consciously, not yet." Matteo smiled. "But she will be, because here's the beautiful part, Lucien. I've been grooming her for years, feeding her information through carefully constructed channels, making her believe certain things about her father, about her family, about you. And when the time is right, she's going to help me destroy everything you've built." "You're delusional." "Am I?" "Then ask her." Matteo looked directly up at the catwalk where Seraphina hid. "Ask your wife why she has 17 email exchanges with a man named Victor Russo." Art dealer, patron, mentor. His smile turned vicious. Also known as me. Lucien followed Mateo's gaze. Their eyes met across the warehouse. Seraphina's heart stopped. She saw the moment Lucien's expression shifted, saw calculation replace fury, saw him add up pieces of a puzzle she didn't even know existed. Seraphina. His voice cut through the air like a blade. Come down here. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her entire body had locked into place. Now! The command cracked through her paralysis. Seraphina descended the stairs on legs that barely worked. Every step felt like walking toward an execution. When she reached the warehouse floor, Lucien's men parted to let her through. She stopped 10 feet from Lucien. His face was carved from stone. Eyes black and cold and completely unreadable. How long have you been working with him? I haven't. The words came out strangled. I don't know what he's talking about. Victor Russo. That name mean anything to you? Seraphina's mind raced. Victor Russo. She did know that name. An art dealer who'd reached out to her 2 years ago. Offered advice on galleries. Connected her with other artists. They'd exchanged emails occasionally. Nothing sinister, just professional networking. I know that name, she said carefully. But I didn't know it was him. Convenient. I'm telling the truth. Are you? Lucien stepped closer. Because from where I'm standing, this looks like a very elaborate trap. My enemies manufactures debt, plants you in my path, makes sure you look innocent and helpless so I'd take you as payment, and now you're inside my home, my organization. Perfect position to gather intelligence and feed it to the man who destroyed my family. That's insane. I didn't know any of this. Prove it. How? Lucien pulled out his phone, pulled up an email, held it where Seraphina could see. Is this your email address? She looked, felt her stomach drop. It was her address, and the email chain showed 17 exchanges with Victor Russo, exactly like Mateo said. Messages about art and technique and personal philosophy. Nothing explicitly criminal, but damning in context. Those are real, she whispered. But I didn't know he was Mateo. I swear. He said he was an art dealer. And you just believed him. Why wouldn't I? He seemed legitimate. He helped me. I had no reason to think. That's the problem, Seraphina. You didn't think. Lucien's voice stayed cold, controlled, but rage simmered beneath every syllable. You were so desperate for validation, for someone to see your art, that you walked right into his trap. And you dragged me with you. Behind them, Mateo laughed. She really didn't know. Look at her face. That's genuine shock. Lucien spun toward him. Shut up. Make me. Mateo's smile widened. Or better yet, shoot me. Right here. In front of your men and your wife. Show everyone what kind of man you really are. Don't tempt me. I'm counting on it. Mateo spread his arms. That's the whole point. I set this up so perfectly. Either you kill me and prove you're still the monster everyone fears, which destroys any chance you have at being something better. Or you let me walk, which makes you look weak. Either way, I win. Lucien's hand moved to his gun. Every man in the warehouse tensed. Seraphina felt the moment stretching thin, ready to snap into violence. Don't, she said. Her voice came out barely louder than a breath. Don't give him what he wants. Lucien didn't look at her. This doesn't concern you. It's the only thing that concerns me. You said I was part of your world now, part of your empire. She took a step closer. Then let me actually be part of it. Not just decoration, not just collateral. Let me help you make the right choice. The right choice is putting a bullet in his skull. No, the right choice is walking away. Lucien finally looked at her, really looked at her. Something raw and desperate flickered behind his eyes. He destroyed my father, destroyed everything I had, and now he's used you to humiliate me in front of my own men. You want me to just let that go? I want you to be smarter than your revenge. And if I'm not, then we all lose. Seraphina's hand shook, but she held his gaze. He's right. This is a trap. Either option makes you weaker, but there's a third option he didn't account for, which is let him think he's won. Let him walk out of here believing he's outsmarted you, and then dismantle him piece by piece from the shadows until he has nothing left. Silence dropped over the warehouse. Mateo's smile faltered. She doesn't know what she's talking about, doesn't she? Lucien's expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile. Something colder. Revenge doesn't have to be instant. It can be slow, surgical, complete. He looked back at Mateo. You came here expecting me to kill you, expecting martyrdom. You probably have contingency plans in place, evidence that goes public if you die, allies ready to move against me. Mateo said nothing, but his jaw tightened. Thought so. Lucien lowered his gun. So instead, I'm going to let you leave. Walk out of here thinking you've won, and then I'm going to spend the next month quietly destroying everything you've built. Your finances, your allies, your safe houses, your reputation. He stepped closer. And when you're standing in the ruins of your own empire with nowhere left to run, I'll come for you, and you'll beg me for the bullet I'm denying you today. Mateo's face went pale. Lucien turned to his men. Let them leave. Boss, one of them started. I said let them leave. The men reluctantly lowered their weapons. Mateo's group exchanged confused glances. This wasn't how ambushes were supposed to end. Violence was expected. Mercy was dangerous. Mateo recovered quickly. His smile returned, brittle around the edges. You think you're being smart, but you're making a mistake. We'll see. Mateo backed towards the exit, his men following. At the doorway he paused, looked at Seraphina. I really was impressed by your art. That part wasn't a lie. Then he was gone. The warehouse fell silent. Lucien stood motionless, staring at the empty doorway. His men shifted uncomfortably, waiting for orders. Seraphina felt like she might collapse if she stopped moving. Finally, Lucien spoke. Everyone out? Boss, out. Now. The men filed toward the exit. Within seconds, the warehouse was empty, except for Lucien and Seraphina. They stood 20 feet apart. The distance felt like miles. I didn't know, Seraphina said again. Her voice cracked. I swear I didn't know. Lucien turned to face her. The mask he wore in public had cracked. Underneath, she saw exhaustion and rage and something that might have been betrayal. It doesn't matter. Of course it matters. No, it doesn't. He ran a hand through his hair. Because even if you didn't know, you're still compromised. Everything you've seen, everything you've learned about my operation, he's had access to all of it through you. Your emails, your phone, probably cameras and microphones planted in your belongings. The words hit like physical blows. Seraphina thought about the suitcases that had appeared in her room that first morning. Thought about her sketchbooks and art supplies arranged so carefully. You think I'm bugged? I think you're a walking security breach. Lucien's voice stayed flat. Which means I can't trust anything you say or do. Can't keep you in the villa. Can't let you anywhere near my business. So what? You're throwing me out? I should. He looked at her, really looked at her. I should put you in a safe house somewhere remote and forget you exist. Cut my losses. Move on. Seraphina's chest tightened. But I can't. The admission seemed to cost him something. He turned away, shoulders rigid, hands clenched into fists. I spent 3 weeks convincing myself you were just collateral, Lucien continued. Just a means to an end, just revenge wrapped in silk. But you got under my skin anyway. Made me think about choices I'd stopped questioning years ago. Made me wonder if there was something better than violence and fear. He laughed bitterly. And the whole time, you were his weapon, planted, groomed, ready to destroy me from the inside. I wasn't. I'm not. Seraphina moved closer. Lucien, look at me. He didn't. Look at me. Finally, he turned. The expression on his face shattered something inside her chest. He looked lost, betrayed, young in a way she'd never seen before. I don't know what's real anymore, he said quietly. I don't know if you're telling the truth or playing a role so perfect even you believe it. And that terrifies me. Because if I'm wrong about you, if I let myself trust you and it's all a lie. He trailed off, shook his head. I can't afford to be wrong. Then test me. The words came out desperate. Whatever you need, truth serum, lie detector, interrogation. I don't care. Test me until you believe I'm telling the truth. And if you're trained to beat those tests, I'm an art student, not a spy. Matteo had years to train you without you even knowing. Lucien stepped back, putting distance between them. He's that good, that patient, that thorough. They stood in the empty warehouse, dawnlight bleeding through broken windows. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. Normal people living normal lives, oblivious to the fact that everything had just collapsed. Seraphina felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. What happens now? Now I do what I should have done from the beginning. Lucien pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke in rapid Italian, hung up. A car will take you to a secure location. You'll stay there while I clean up this mess. For how long? As long as it takes. And then, Lucien's expression closed off completely. Back to the mask. Back to the monster. And then I decide if you're worth the risk. The car arrived 10 minutes later. Different from Lucien's usual convoy. Unmarked. Anonymous. A driver who didn't make eye contact climbed out and opened the back door. Get in, Lucien said. Seraphina didn't move. I'm telling the truth. Maybe you are. Maybe you're not. He gestured toward the car. Either way, you're a liability now, and I don't keep liabilities close. You're making a mistake. That's my specialty. Seraphina wanted to scream, wanted to fight, wanted to grab him and shake him until he listened. But exhaustion and shock had drained her completely. She walked to the car on numb legs and climbed inside. The door closed. Through the window, she watched Lucien standing alone in the warehouse parking lot. He looked smaller somehow. Less dangerous. Just a man carrying weight he was never built to hold. The car pulled away. Seraphina pressed her forehead against the glass and finally let herself cry. Quiet, shaking sobs that ripped through her chest. She'd spent 3 weeks learning to survive in Lucien's world, learning to understand the monster, learning to see the man underneath, and now she was being erased, locked away, disappeared. The car drove through Rome as the city woke. They left the industrial sectors and headed into residential areas. Nice neighborhoods, trees and gates and houses that cost more than most people made in lifetimes. Finally, they stopped outside a small villa. Cream-colored walls, red tile roof, garden in front. Looked peaceful, normal, like a prison pretending to be a home. The driver opened her door. Inside, someone will bring your things later. Seraphina climbed out. The villa's front door opened and Elena appeared. Not smiling this time, just tired. Come, Elena said. I'll show you your room. Am I a prisoner or a guest? Does it matter? No, it didn't. Seraphina followed Elena inside. The villa was smaller than Lucien's estate, but still beautiful. Hardwood floors, white walls, windows overlooking the garden. Empty, silent, lonely. Elena led her upstairs to a bedroom. Simple furniture, clean sheets, bars on the windows disguised as decorative ironwork. You'll stay here until Mr. Moretti decides what to do with you, Elena said. How long will that take? I don't know. Elena left, locked the door from the outside. Seraphina stood alone in the center of the room, listening to footsteps fade away. She walked to the window and stared at the garden below, roses blooming, birds singing, the illusion of freedom just beyond reach. She thought about Lucien standing in that warehouse, thought about the look in his eyes when he realized she'd been compromised, thought about the way he'd said he couldn't trust her anymore. And she understood the terrible truth. Matteo hadn't just destroyed Lucien's organization. He'd destroyed the one thing Lucien had started to believe in, the possibility that revenge might not be the only thing worth living for. And Seraphina, however unwittingly, had been the weapon that delivered the killing blow. She sank onto the bed and buried her face in her hands. Somewhere in Rome, Matteo was probably celebrating his victory. Somewhere else, Lucien was probably planning his next move. And here, locked in this beautiful prison, Seraphina finally understood what it meant to be collateral damage in someone else's war. She'd lost everything. Her freedom, her innocence, the fragile connection she'd been building with the man who'd bought her. And the worst part was knowing that even if she proved her innocence, even if she convinced Lucien she'd been manipulated without her knowledge, nothing would ever be the same. Because trust, once shattered, could never be fully repaired. And some weapons, once fired, could never be recalled. Outside, afternoon sunlight painted the garden gold. Inside, Seraphina sat in darkness and waited for a verdict she wasn't sure she'd survive. 5 days passed at the safe house like drowning in slow motion. Seraphina counted hours by the way sunlight moved across the bedroom floor. Morning, afternoon, evening, night, each day identical to the last. Elena brought meals 3 times daily, unlocked the door, set down a tray, left without speaking. The silence was its own kind of torture. No phone, no computer, no way to reach anyone. Just 4 walls and the weight of accusations she couldn't disprove. On the 6th day, everything changed. Seraphina woke to shouting downstairs. Male voices, urgent, angry. She sat up fast, pulse spiking, and pressed her ear against the door. Can't just take her. Mr. Moretti's orders. She's a security risk. That's not your decision. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. The lock clicked. The door burst open. 3 men stood in the hallway. Not Lucien's usual guards. These were rougher, scarred. The kind who'd done things that left permanent marks on their souls. The one in front smiled. Mrs. Moretti, time to go. Seraphina backed against the far wall. Go where? Somewhere more secure. Lucien sent you? Does it matter? He lunged. Seraphina dodged sideways, but the room was too small. He caught her arm, fingers digging into flesh hard enough to bruise. She screamed and drove her knee toward his groin. He twisted, took the impact on his thigh, and backhanded her across the face. Pain exploded through her skull. She tasted copper. The world tilted. Someone grabbed her from behind, arms locked around her chest. She thrashed, kicking backward, connecting with something that made a man grunt. But there were 3 of them and 1 of her, and within seconds they had her pinned. Feisty, the first one said. I like that. He pulled a zip tie from his pocket, yanked Seraphina's wrists together in front of her body, pulled the plastic tight enough to cut circulation. She tried to scream again, but someone shoved fabric into her mouth, gagged her. Much better. He grabbed her hair and forced her head back. Now, we're going to walk downstairs very quietly. You're going to get in the car, and if you try anything stupid, I'll break your fingers one by one. Understood? Seraphina couldn't speak around the gag, could barely breathe. She nodded once. They dragged her downstairs. Elena lay crumpled in the entrance hall, blood pooling beneath her head, not moving. Seraphina's stomach lurched. She tried to pull toward the older woman, but the men yanked her toward the front door. Outside, a van waited. Black, windowless, engine running. They shoved Seraphina inside. The door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed everything except a thin line of light where the front cabin was separated by a metal partition. The van lurched forward. Seraphina's mind raced. This wasn't Lucien, couldn't be Lucien. He'd locked her away to protect his organization, not to hurt her. These men were something else. Someone else. Matteo. The realization hit like ice water. Matteo had found her, taken her, and now she was being transported somewhere far worse than Lucien's safe house. She worked at the zip tie with her teeth, trying to loosen the gag enough to breathe properly. The plastic cut into her wrists. Blood made her hands slippery. Minutes crawled past. The van turned, accelerated, turned again. Finally, the gag came loose enough for her to spit it out. Seraphina sucked in air, head spinning. She kicked at the partition separating her from the driver. Once, twice, 3 times. Metal rang but didn't give. Help! Her voice came out raw. Someone help me! Laughter filtered through from the front. Scream all you want, princess. No one's coming. The van drove for what felt like hours. Eventually, the engine's rhythm changed. Smoother road became rough terrain. Gravel crunched under tires. They were leaving the city, heading somewhere remote, somewhere people disappeared. Seraphina closed her eyes and forced herself to think. Panic wouldn't help. Screaming wouldn't help. She needed a plan, needed to survive long enough to find an opening. Lucien's face flickered through her mind. The way he'd looked at her in the warehouse, the betrayal in his eyes, the wall he'd built between them. She wondered if he even knew she'd been taken. Wondered if he'd care. The van finally stopped. Doors opened. Rough hands dragged Seraphina out into blinding sunlight. She blinked, disoriented, trying to focus. They were in the middle of nowhere, abandoned farmland, crumbling stone buildings. No signs of civilization in any direction. Perfect place for a murder. The men hauled her toward the largest building. Inside, concrete floors, rusted metal beams, water dripping somewhere. And in the center of the space, sitting in a folding chair like a king on a throne, sat Matteo. He smiled when he saw her. Seraphina, so glad you could join us. Fuck you. Such language. He gestured to his men. Put her in the chair. They shoved her down. One of them produced more zip ties and secured her ankles to the chair legs. Another tied her bound wrists to the armrests. When they finished, Seraphina couldn't move anything except her head. Matteo dismissed his men with a wave. They disappeared into the shadows, leaving uncle and niece alone. He studied her for a long moment. You look like your mother. Same eyes, same stubborn jaw. She had that same fire in her too, right before she died. Seraphina's throat tightened. Her mother had died of cancer when she was 16. Long, painful, inevitable. Don't talk about her. Why not? She was my sister. I loved her. You don't know what love is. No? Matteo leaned forward. I loved her enough to warn her about your father. Told her Thomas Vale was a lying, gambling, worthless piece of shit who'd drag her down. But she married him anyway, and look what happened. She worked herself to death trying to keep your family afloat while he drank and gambled everything away. That's not... It's exactly what happened. Matteo's voice hardened. Your father destroyed her, just like he's destroying you, just like he destroys everything he touches. Seraphina yanked against the restraints. Pain shot through her wrists. If you're trying to make me sympathize with you, it's not working. I don't need your sympathy. I need your cooperation. For what? To finish what I started. Matteo stood and began pacing. 15 years ago, I testified against Antonio Moretti because he was a monster, a killer, a cancer on this city. I thought putting him in prison would make things better. Instead, it created something worse. His son. Lucien is everything his father was, but smarter, more dangerous, more willing to cross lines Antonio never would have. So this is about justice? Seraphina laughed bitterly. You destroyed the Moretti family for the greater good? I destroyed them because they needed to be destroyed. And marrying me to Lucien, manipulating me for years, what greater good does that serve? Matteo stopped pacing, looked at her with something that might have been regret. You were never supposed to matter. You were just a tool, a way to get inside Lucien's organization. But then you actually started affecting him, changing him, making him soft. He shook his head. That's when I realized you could be something more valuable than a spy. What? Leverage. The word landed cold. Matteo pulled out his phone, dialed, put it on speaker. It rang twice before someone answered. What? Lucien's voice, sharp and exhausted. Hello, Lucien. I have something that belongs to you. Silence. Then, where is she? Alive. For now. Matteo walked closer to Seraphina. Want to say hello? Seraphina's pulse hammered. Lucien, don't hurt her. The words came out fast, desperate, not like Lucien at all. Whatever you want. Name it. Just don't hurt her. How touching. Matteo smiled. The great Lucien Moretti begging. I never thought I'd see the day. Name, your price. It's simple. You dismantle your organization, every business, every alliance, every source of power. You walk away from the empire you spent 15 years building, and in exchange, I let Seraphina go. Done. The answer came so fast it shocked everyone. Seraphina stared at the phone. Matteo's smile faltered. You're lying, Matteo said. I'm not. You want the empire? Take it. I'll sign everything over to you. Businesses, properties, bank accounts. All of it. Just let her go. And what's to stop you from hunting me down afterward? My word, Matteo laughed. Your word is worth nothing. Then what do you want? Blood? My life? Lucien's voice cracked. You want me dead? Fine. Tell me where to meet you. I'll come alone. Unarmed. You can put a bullet in my head right in front of her. Just let Seraphina go afterward. Seraphina's chest tightened. No. Lucien, no. Quiet. Matteo pressed the phone closer to her mouth. Your husband is offering to die for you. Very romantic. But I don't want his death. I want his suffering. You already have that, Seraphina said. Her voice shook. You've taken everything from him, his father, his empire. his ability to trust anyone. What more do you want? I want him to lose the one thing he actually cares about. Matteo's expression turned cold. You. Then you've already won. He doesn't trust me anymore. Thinks I'm working with you. He locked me away because of your lies. And yet here he is, offering to give up everything to save you. Matteo studied her carefully. That doesn't sound like a man who stopped caring. Matteo, Lucien's voice cut through. Enough games. Tell me where you are. I'll come get her. We'll settle this. Oh, we'll settle it, but on my terms. Matteo checked his watch. I'm texting you coordinates. Old factory, east of the city. Be there in 2 hours, alone, unarmed. Bring proof that you've started dismantling your organization. I want bank transfers, property deeds, everything. That's impossible in 2 hours. Then I guess Seraphina dies. Wait, Matteo hung up. Silence dropped over the abandoned building like a curtain. Seraphina's mind raced. 2 hours. Lucien couldn't possibly dismantle his entire empire in 2 hours. Matteo knew that. This wasn't about negotiation. This was about forcing Lucien to watch her die. He'll come, Matteo said quietly. And when he does, I'll make him watch while I put a bullet in your head. Then I'll kill him. Slowly. Painfully. And the Moretti name will finally be erased from Rome forever. You're insane. I'm thorough. He gestured to his men. Move her to the factory. Prepare the space. I want cameras recording everything. They cut the zip ties securing her to the chair but left her wrists and ankles bound, dragged her back to the van, threw her inside like cargo. The drive took 30 minutes. The factory Matteo had chosen was even more desolate than the farmhouse. Rusted metal, shattered windows, graffiti covering every surface. The kind of place where homeless people went to die and no one found the bodies for weeks. They hauled Seraphina inside and secured her to a support beam in the center of the main floor. Chains this time. Heavy industrial chains locked around her chest and waist, pinning her upright. Her bound hands dangled uselessly in front of her body. Matteo's men set up cameras on tripods, positioned lights, checked angles like they were filming a movie instead of a murder. Matteo supervised everything with cold precision. When Moretti arrives, he needs to see her clearly. No shadows, no doubt about what's happening. One of his men grunted acknowledgement. What about weapons? Standard loadout, rifles, handguns. I want overwhelming force. When Lucien walks in here, he needs to understand immediately that resistance is suicide. And if he brings backup anyway? Then everyone dies. Matteo said it casually, like discussing weather. Simple as that. Time crawled. Seraphina hung against the support beam, chains digging into her ribs, trying to think of any possible escape. But the chains were solid. The factory was surrounded by Matteo's men. And even if she somehow got free, she was miles from anywhere. No escape, no backup, no miracles. She closed her eyes and thought about the warehouse where Lucien had shot Russo. Thought about the way violence had felt inevitable, natural. She'd been horrified then, sickened by the casual brutality. Now she understood it. Violence was just another tool, another language spoken by people who lived in shadows. And in 90 minutes, this factory would become a tomb for everyone stupid enough to show up, including Lucien, including her. He's going to die because of me, Seraphina said, out loud. Matteo glanced over. Probably. You don't have to do this. Let me go. Leave him alone. Just disappear. And let him continue building his empire? Corrupting this city? Becoming worse than his father ever was? Matteo shook his head. No. This ends tonight, one way or another. He's not his father. He's exactly his father, just with better PR. No. Seraphina's voice strengthened. I've lived with him. I've seen him make choices. He's trying to be better, trying to build something that doesn't require so much blood. Is that what you tell yourself? That you're reforming him? Matteo's laugh was cruel. You're not saving him, Seraphina. You're just the reason he'll hesitate before pulling the trigger. And that hesitation is what will get you both killed. The words cut deep because they carried truth. Lucien had changed in the weeks she'd been with him, softened in ways his enemies could exploit. And now he was walking into a trap because of her. Because despite everything, the manipulation, the distrust, the broken pieces between them, he still cared enough to try to save her. And that caring would destroy him. Seraphina yanked against the chains hard enough to make her ribs scream. The metal didn't give. She was trapped, helpless, about to watch the man who'd bought her die trying to rescue someone who'd been weaponized against him. Somewhere outside, an engine rumbled. Matteo checked his watch. Right on time. He's punctual. I'll give him that. His men moved into position, rifles raised, fingers on triggers. Matteo stood near the entrance, calm and ready. The factory door scraped open. Lucien walked in alone. He looked like hell. Dark circles under his eyes, unshaven jaw, clothes rumpled. He carried a briefcase in his left hand and nothing else. No gun visible, no backup trailing behind. Just a man walking into his own execution. His eyes found Seraphina immediately. Something cracked across his face. Relief, horror, rage, all of it flickering too fast to name. "I'm here," Lucien said. "Let her go." "Show me what you brought first." Matteo gestured to the briefcase. Lucien set it on the floor, opened it. Inside papers, bank documents, property deeds, proof of transfers. Matteo's man took photos of everything, verified details. Finally nodded to Matteo. "Impressive," Matteo said. "You actually started dismantling your empire. I didn't think you'd go through with it." "I said I would." Lucien's gaze never left Seraphina. "Now let her go." In a moment, Matteo pulled out a gun, leveled it at Lucien's chest. "First, I want you to understand something. Your father destroyed my family, corrupted my sister, turned this city into a war zone. And when I finally stopped him, you spent 15 years making everything worse. My father was a monster. I won't defend him. But you'll continue his work. I'm trying to do better. Are you?" Matteo's voice turned cold. "Or are you just better at hiding the bodies?" Lucien said nothing. "That's what I thought." Matteo cocked the gun. "Any last words?" "Yeah." Lucien looked directly at Seraphina. "I'm sorry." The two words carried weight that almost broke her. Seraphina pulled against the chains, voice raw. "Lucien, run!" Gunfire exploded through the factory, but not from Matteo's gun, from everywhere at once. The windows shattered inward as armed men in tactical gear stormed through every entrance simultaneously. Matteo's men spun, trying to return fire, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Bodies hit the concrete. Someone screamed. Smoke filled the air. Lucien dove behind a support beam. Matteo swung his gun toward Seraphina. "You set me up!" Another gunshot. Matteo's shoulder erupted red. He staggered backward, gun clattering to the floor. One of Lucien's men tackled him, slamming him face first into concrete. Within 30 seconds, the battle was over. Lucien's forces had swept through like a hurricane. Matteo's men were either dead, wounded, or surrendering. And standing in the center of the carnage, Lucien looked at Seraphina with eyes that burned. He crossed to her in 3 strides, pulled a key from his pocket, unlocked the chains. They fell away. Seraphina collapsed forward. Lucien caught her, arms wrapping around her waist, holding her upright. "You came," she gasped. "Of course I came." "But you didn't trust me." "I was wrong." His voice cracked. "I was so fucking wrong. About everything." Seraphina pulled back enough to look at his face. Blood splattered his cheek. Sweat matted his hair. He looked like something dragged through hell. He looked beautiful. "How did you know where I was?" she asked. "I didn't. Not until Matteo called." Lucien's jaw tightened. "The safe house was hit 6 hours ago. Elena's in the hospital, critical condition. When I couldn't find you, I knew Matteo had taken you, so I played along. Made him think I was coming alone. Drew him out." The briefcase. Fake documents. Meaningless transfers to shell companies I control. He cupped her face with both hands. "Did you really think I'd give up my empire? The only leverage I have to keep you safe?" Seraphina wanted to laugh, wanted to cry, settled for leaning her forehead against his chest and just breathing. Around them, Lucien's men secured the factory. Zip-tied prisoners, called for cleanup crews. Matteo sat slumped against a wall, blood soaking through his shirt, glaring at Lucien with hatred that could melt steel. "You haven't won," Matteo spat. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Lucien stepped away from Seraphina and walked toward his enemy, crouched in front of him. "You were right about one thing. I am my father's son. I do understand violence, and I understand that some people can't be negotiated with, can't be reformed, can't be anything except eliminated. He pulled out his gun, pressed it against Matteo's forehead. Wait, Seraphina said. Lucien froze. Didn't look away from Matteo. Why? Because if you kill him, you prove him right. You prove you're exactly the monster he says you are. Maybe I am, but you don't have to be. Lucien's finger tightened on the trigger. For 3 endless seconds, nobody breathed. The factory held its breath, life and death balanced on a razor's edge. Then Lucien lowered the gun, stood, walked back to Seraphina. Take him, he said to his men. Maximum security. Solitary. No visitors. No communication. He rots in a cell until he dies of old age. His men dragged Matteo toward the exit. The old man fought, screaming, You'll regret this. You'll regret not killing me when you had the chance. Maybe. But Lucien wasn't listening anymore. He wrapped his arms around Seraphina and held her like she might disappear if he let go. She clung back just as fiercely, feeling his heart hammer against her cheek. I thought I'd lost you, he whispered. You almost did. I'm sorry. For doubting you. For locking you away. For being too fucking blind to see that Matteo was playing both of us. Seraphina pulled back enough to meet his eyes. You were trying to protect your organization. I understand that. No, I was trying to protect myself. Lucien's hands framed her face. Because somewhere between the cathedral and today, you stopped being revenge and became the only thing I actually give a damn about. And that terrified me. The confession hung between them. Seraphina saw truth in his eyes, saw the walls he'd built crumbling, saw the man underneath the monster finally brave enough to admit he needed someone. I don't forgive you, she said quietly. His expression tightened. But I understand you, and I'm choosing to stay anyway. Why? Because I see what you're trying to become, and I think it's worth fighting for. Lucien kissed her, hard, desperate, like drowning and breathing at the same time. Seraphina kissed back, tasting blood and smoke and impossible choices. Around them, the factory buzzed with activity. Sirens approached. Cleanup crews moved bodies. None of it mattered. For this moment, there was only the two of them. Two broken people trying to build something that didn't require so much violence. When they finally pulled apart, Lucien rested his forehead against hers. Let's go home, he said. Where's home? Wherever you are. They walked out of the factory together as dawn broke over Rome. The city glowed gold and pink, beautiful and terrible, full of shadows that would never completely disappear. But for the first time since the cathedral, Seraphina felt like she might actually survive this. Might even find a way to live instead of just existing. And as Lucien's hand found hers, fingers interlacing, she realized something crucial. The war wasn't over. But they'd stopped fighting each other. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The drive back to the villa passed in silence, heavy enough to suffocate. Seraphina sat pressed against the car door, watching Rome blur past the window. Dawn light painted everything gold, but she couldn't stop seeing the factory. The chains. Matteo's gun pointed at Lucien's chest, the moment she thought she'd watch him die. Lucien sat rigid beside her, jaw tight, hands clenched into fists on his thighs. Blood still spattered his shirt. His knuckles were raw. He looked like a man barely holding himself together through sheer force of will. When they finally reached the villa, he killed the engine, but didn't move to get out. I need to tell you something, he said quietly. Seraphina turned to look at him. What? Your father. Lucien stared straight ahead at the villa's entrance. The debt was real. Her stomach dropped. What? Matteo lied about some things, but not about your father gambling, not about the debt. Lucien's voice stayed flat, empty. Thomas Vale borrowed 3 million euros from my organization over 8 years. That part was true. What Matteo fabricated was your involvement. The emails with Victor Russo. The suggestion that you were planted. That was manipulation. But your father's debt? That was real. Seraphina felt the world tilt sideways. You're lying. I wish I was. Lucien finally looked at her. I had my people verify everything while you were in the safe house. Your father gambled, lost, borrowed, lost more. By the time we called in the debt, he was drowning. Matteo didn't create that situation. He just exploited it. Then why did Matteo show you those bank records? Why claim the debt was fake? Because some of it was exaggerated. My organization inflated the numbers, added interest your father never agreed to, turned 3 million into 5, used it as justification to take you. Lucien's jaw worked. So yes, your father owed me money, but not enough to justify what I did, not enough to justify buying you like property. The admission landed like a physical blow. Seraphina pressed her hands to her face, trying to process. Her father had lied. Lucien had lied. Matteo had weaponized both lies against each other, and she'd been caught in the middle, collateral damage in a war that had started before she was born. I'm telling you now because you deserve the truth, Lucien continued. All of it. Not the version that makes me look better, not the story that justifies what I did. Just the ugly, complicated reality. Why? Seraphina's voice cracked. Why tell me now? Because I'm done lying to you. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. And because if we're going to survive this, survive each other, it has to start with honesty, even when it's brutal. Seraphina looked down at their interlaced fingers. His knuckles were scarred. Hers were bruised from the zip ties, two broken people holding on to each other like drowning swimmers. I don't know if I can forgive any of this, she said. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance. At what? At something better than revenge. Lucien's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, at building something that doesn't require so much blood. The words echoed what she'd said to him in the warehouse, in the factory, every time violence had threatened to consume them both. Seraphina took a shaking breath. I need time. Take all the time you need. And space. I need space to think without you watching me like I might disappear. Something flickered across Lucien's face. Fear, maybe, or understanding that she was serious. You're not leaving. No, but I'm not sharing your bed either, not yet. Maybe not ever. She met his eyes. If you want a real chance, you have to let me choose it. Not force it, not manipulate it. Actually let me decide if this is something I want. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Okay. I'll give you space. Time. Whatever you need. He released her hand. But I'm not giving up on this. On us. Not after everything. They got out of the car and walked into the villa together. The entrance hall felt different now. Less like a prison, more like a battlefield where truces were negotiated instead of enforced. Elena had been right about one thing. Lucien was complicated. And Seraphina was starting to understand that complicated didn't mean irredeemable. The next 3 weeks unfolded in careful, fragile patterns. Lucien gave Seraphina the space she'd demanded. Separate bedrooms. No expectations. He went to work managing his organization while she spent days painting in the studio he'd set up for her. A converted sunroom overlooking the gardens, filled with natural light and blank canvases. She painted violence at first. The cathedral, the warehouse, the factory. Dark, fractured images that bled across white surfaces like wounds refusing to close. But slowly, the paintings changed. Light started breaking through the darkness. Figures emerged from shadows. Hands reaching instead of striking. Windows opening instead of caging. Lucien never asked to see the work. Never entered the studio without permission. But sometimes Seraphina would find him standing in the doorway, silent, just watching her paint with an expression she couldn't quite name. They had dinner together most nights. Conversations that started stilted and careful, but gradually deepened into something real. He told her about rebuilding his father's empire. She told him about her mother's death and the years of struggling to make art matter. They talked about books and music and the strange intimacy of two people learning to be honest with each other. He never touched her without permission, never pressured her for more than she was ready to give. And somehow that restraint made her want him more than any amount of force ever could. On the 23rd day after the factory, Seraphina made a decision. She found Lucien in his study, surrounded by paperwork and ledgers. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face. I want to see my father, she said. Lucien set down his pen slowly. Why? Because I need to hear the truth from him, not from you, not from Matteo, from the man who traded me like property. Her hands shook, but her voice stayed steady. and I need to decide if I can ever forgive him. He's dangerous, Seraphina. Not physically, but emotionally. He'll manipulate you, make excuses, try to justify what he did. I know. She stepped closer to the desk. But I still need to do this. For myself. Lucien studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll arrange it. When? Tomorrow. I'll have him brought to a neutral location, somewhere safe. He paused. I'll be there. In the building. Not in the room, but close. In case you need me. Thank you. She turned to leave, but Lucien's voice stopped her. Seraphina. She looked back. Whatever he says, whatever excuses he makes, remember that his choices are his, not yours. You didn't cause this. You survived it. Lucien's dark eyes held hers. That's what matters. The words settled into her chest like stones. The next afternoon, Lucien drove Seraphina to a small office building on the outskirts of Rome. Neutral territory. No guards visible, but she knew they were there, watching from shadows. He led her to a conference room on the second floor. Plain table. 2 chairs. Windows overlooking a parking lot. I'll be next door, Lucien said. Knock on the wall if you need me. Seraphina nodded. Her pulse hammered in her throat. Lucien left. The door closed. 5 minutes later, it opened again. Thomas Vale walked in looking like he'd aged 20 years. Gray hair, hollow eyes. Shoulders slumped under weight he'd been carrying too long. He saw Seraphina and stopped in the doorway like he'd been struck. Sarah. Her childhood nickname. He hadn't used it in years. Sit down, Dad. He sat, slowly, like his bones hurt. They stared at each other across the table. Father and daughter, stranger and stranger. You look good, Thomas said finally. Healthy. Don't. Seraphina's voice cut sharp. Don't pretend this is a normal visit. Don't make small talk. Just tell me the truth. What truth? All of it. The gambling, the debt, the decision to trade me to the Moretti family. I want to hear you say it out loud. Thomas flinched. Sarah, say it. He took a shaking breath. I gambled for years. Started after your mother got sick. Thought I could win enough to pay for better treatment, better doctors. But I lost. Kept losing. Borrowed from dangerous people to cover the losses. Borrowed more. By the time she died, I was drowning in debt I couldn't repay. And instead of facing consequences, you sold me. I didn't sell you. I made a deal. What's the difference? The difference is you're alive. Thomas's voice broke. They were going to kill me, Sarah, actually kill me. And then they were going to come after you. Make examples. Lucien Moretti doesn't forgive debts. He collects them. In blood, if necessary. So you gave him me instead. I gave him a marriage contract, legal protection, a way for both families to save face. He leaned forward desperately. I thought if you married into the Moretti family, you'd be protected, safe. I didn't know he'd... Didn't know he'd what? Treat me like property? Lock me away? Use me as revenge against Uncle Matteo? Seraphina's mouth clenched into fists. You didn't know because you didn't ask, didn't care. You just wanted your debt erased and your own skin saved. That's not fair. None of this is fair. She stood abruptly. The chair scraped across the floor. You were supposed to protect me. You're my father. That's your job. And instead you sacrificed me to save yourself. Thomas stood too. Tears streaked his face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Sarah. If I could go back and change it. But you can't. None of us can. Seraphina wrapped her arms around herself. Do you know what it felt like? Standing in that cathedral, realizing you'd traded me? Realizing the man who was supposed to love me unconditionally had decided I was worth less than his gambling debts? I do love you. No, you love yourself. You always have. The words came out cold. Final. And I spent 24 years making excuses for you, believing you'd change, believing you cared. But you don't. You never did. Silence fell heavy between them. Thomas looked broken, small, like a man who'd finally run out of lies to tell himself. What happens now? He asked quietly. Now you live with your choices. Seraphina moved toward the door. Lucien's organization will leave you alone. You won't be hunted, won't be killed. But you also won't contact me, ever. No letters, no phone calls, no showing up at my door begging forgiveness. Sarah, please. I'm done, Dad. We're done. She opened the door, looked back one last time. I hope the gambling was worth it. She walked out before he could respond. Lucien waited in the hallway. He took one look at her face and pulled her against his chest. Seraphina didn't cry, didn't break down, just stood there breathing, feeling the weight of 24 years finally lifting. You okay? Lucien asked. No, but I will be. He drove her back to the villa. They didn't talk about what happened, didn't need to. Some conversations existed beyond words. That night, Seraphina knocked on Lucien's bedroom door. He opened it wearing sweatpants and nothing else, hair wet from a shower. Surprise flickered across his face when he saw her standing there in pajamas. Can I come in? She asked. He stepped aside wordlessly. Seraphina entered and sat on the edge of his bed. The room was masculine, simple. None of the ornate decoration from the rest of the villa. Just a man's space. Private. Real. Lucien sat beside her, careful to leave distance between them. What do you need? I don't want to be alone tonight. Okay. No questions, no expectations, just acceptance. They lay down together on top of the covers. Lucien wrapped one arm around her waist, pulling her against his chest. Seraphina fit perfectly in the curve of his body. She felt his heartbeat against her spine. Steady, strong, alive. Thank you, she whispered, for letting me see him, for not trying to protect me from hard truths. You're stronger than you think. Lucien's breath stirred her hair. You don't need protection. You need partnership. Is that what this is? A partnership? I don't know what this is yet, but I want to find out. Seraphina turned in his arms until they were face to face, inches apart. She could see gold flecks in his dark eyes, could count the faint scars on his cheekbone, could feel heat radiating from his skin. I'm still angry at you, she said. I know, and I don't trust you completely. I know that too. But I'm choosing to stay anyway. Not because I'm trapped, not because I don't have options, but because I see what you're trying to become, and I think it's worth fighting for. Lucien's hand came up to cup her face. What am I trying to become? Someone who builds instead of destroys. Someone who chooses mercy over revenge. Someone who can look at broken things and see possibility instead of weapons. She kissed him softly. Someone worth loving. I don't deserve you. No, you don't. She kissed him again. But I'm choosing you anyway. This time when they came together, it wasn't desperate or violent. It was slow, deliberate. Two people deciding to be vulnerable with each other despite every reason not to. Lucien touched her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. Seraphina let herself trust him despite the scars and the history and the violence that would always be part of who he was. They didn't make love. They made a choice. And sometimes, chosen intimacy is the most powerful thing in a broken world. Afterward, they lay tangled together, breathing in sync. Lucien traced patterns on Seraphina's bare shoulder. She pressed her ear against his chest and listened to his heartbeat. What happens now? She asked. Now we figure out how to live with each other. Really live, not just survive. How do we do that? One day at a time, one choice at a time. He kissed the top of her head, starting with tomorrow. What's tomorrow? I'm taking you somewhere. Where? You'll see. The next morning, Lucien drove Seraphina into Rome's art district. Narrow streets, colorful buildings, galleries and studios tucked between cafes and bookstores. He parked outside a converted warehouse and led her inside. The space was massive. High ceilings, white walls, natural light pouring through skylights, empty except for a desk and some basic furniture. What is this? Seraphina asked. Your studio, if you want it. Lucien watched her carefully. I bought the building 6 months ago, before everything fell apart. Was planning to surprise you, but then he trailed off. Anyway, it's yours. No strings, no expectations, just a space where you can create without anyone watching. Seraphina walked through the empty warehouse, footsteps echoing off concrete. She imagined canvases covering the walls, paintings in progress, the smell of oil paint and turpentine, a place that was entirely hers. "Why?" she asked. "Because you need something that's yours, not mine, not ours, just yours." Lucien moved closer. "And because your art deserves to be seen, really seen, not hidden away in a villa where only I get to appreciate it." Tears burned behind Seraphina's eyes. "This is too much." "It's not enough. But it's a start." She turned to face him, saw sincerity in his expression, saw a man trying to make amends the only way he knew how. "I'll take it," she said, "on one condition." "Name it." "Help me plan a showing, a real gallery exhibition. Not just my work. Other artists too. People who need platforms. People who have something to say but no one listening." Lucien smiled, actually smiled. Done. Over the next 4 months, Seraphina transformed the warehouse into a working studio. She painted for hours every day. Dark themes giving way to light, cages becoming windows, chains becoming threads connecting instead of binding. She reached out to other artists, young painters struggling to make rent, sculptors working 3 jobs, photographers capturing Rome's forgotten corners, gave them space in her studio, built community where there'd only been isolation. Lucien helped behind the scenes, provided funding without demanding credit, connected her with gallery owners and critics, never once tried to control or direct her vision. And slowly, carefully, they built something that resembled a relationship. Not perfect, not easy, but real. They fought about his work, about boundaries, about the violence that still colored his world. Seraphina refused to pretend she didn't see it, refused to accept easy explanations, pushed him to be better, choose differently. And Lucien, impossibly, tried. He walked away from deals that required bloodshed, negotiated instead of threatening, built alliances based on mutual benefit instead of fear. It was slow, painful. His organization resisted, but he persisted, because Seraphina had shown him that another way was possible, and he decided that possibility was worth the cost. 6 months after the factory, Seraphina's gallery exhibition opened. The warehouse had transformed into something beautiful. Paintings covered every wall, sculptures occupied corners, photographs hung from ceiling wires, creating a forest of images that visitors walked through. Seraphina's work anchored the center. 5 large canvases forming a series she called Metamorphosis. Each painting showed the same woman, her, transforming through stages, caged, breaking free, bloodied, healing, finally standing in light that poured through shattered windows. The final painting was different from the rest. It showed 2 figures standing side by side in ruins, not embracing, just standing together, separate but connected, broken but choosing to stay. She'd titled it Chosen. Opening night, the gallery filled with people, artists, critics, collectors, wealthy Romans who appreciated beauty but had no idea about the violence that had created it. They wandered through the space, commenting on technique and composition. Lucien stood in a corner wearing a dark suit, watching Seraphina move through the crowd. She wore a simple black dress, hair loose, makeup minimal. She looked radiant, alive, like the girl in the cathedral had finally found her way out of the darkness. Someone approached Lucien, a silver-haired woman dripping in diamonds. "You must be very proud. Your wife is exceptionally talented." Lucien's gaze never left Seraphina. "She's not my wife because of her talent. She's my wife because she's stronger than anyone I've ever met, including me." "How romantic." "It's not romance. It's fact." The woman drifted away, confused. Lucien didn't care. He'd stopped caring what people thought months ago. The only opinion that mattered stood across the room, laughing at something an artist had said. Seraphina caught his eye, smiled. Not the brittle performance smile from those first weeks. A real smile. Warm. Genuine. For him. Lucien felt something in his chest crack open. Something that had been frozen for 15 years. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. Later that night, after the crowds left and the gallery emptied, Lucien and Seraphina stood alone in front of Chosen. "What do you think?" she asked. "Honest opinion." "I think it's perfect." Lucien studied the 2 figures in the painting, saw himself and Seraphina reflected in brushstrokes. "I think it tells the truth about who we are. broken, choosing each other anyway. Are we choosing each other? Or just surviving together? Does it matter? Yeah, it does. Lucien turned to face her, took both her hands. I choose you, Seraphina, every day, even when it's hard, even when my world fights back, even when I don't deserve you. I choose you. Why? Because you make me want to be better than my worst instincts. Because you see the monster and still believe I can be something else. Because loving you is the hardest, most terrifying thing I've ever done. And I'd rather be terrified with you than safe alone. Seraphina's eyes filled with tears. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. I'm trying to do better. At honesty. At everything. She pulled him down and kissed him. Slow and deep and full of promises neither of them were sure they could keep. But they'd try. That was the point. Trying mattered more than perfect success. When they finally pulled apart, Seraphina rested her forehead against his chest. I love you, she whispered. I don't know when it happened. Probably somewhere between the warehouse and the factory. Probably when I should have been running, but I do. I love you. Lucien's arms tightened around her. I love you too, more than revenge, more than empire, more than anything I thought mattered before you. They stood together in the empty gallery, surrounded by art born from violence and trauma and impossible choices. Outside, Rome continued its ancient rhythm. Inside, two people who'd been weapons against each other learned what it meant to be partners instead. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no magical transformation that erased the past. Lucien's world stayed dangerous. Seraphina's scars stayed real. They fought. They struggled. They made mistakes. But they chose each other anyway. And 1 year after the cathedral, on a quiet afternoon in the villa's gardens, Lucien asked Seraphina a question. Marry me again? She looked up from her sketchbook, surprised. We're already married. Not like this. Not by choice. He pulled a ring from his pocket. Simple gold band. No diamonds. No ostentation. Just metal shaped by intention. Marry me because you want to. Because you're choosing this. Not because your father traded you or I bought you. Because we decided together that this is worth fighting for. Seraphina stared at the ring. At the man holding it. At the impossible distance they'd traveled from that cathedral to this moment. Yes, she said. No hesitation. No doubt. Just yes. They married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the villa. No politicians, no crime families, no cameras or performances. Just 20 people who actually mattered. Seraphina wore cream silk. Lucien wore a dark suit. They stood in the gardens where roses bloomed and spoke vows they'd written themselves. I promise to choose you every day, Seraphina said. Even when it's hard. Even when we disagree. Even when your world threatens to consume us both. I promise to see you, the man and the monster, and love them both. I promise to be worthy of your choice, Lucien said. To build something better than revenge. To protect what we have without destroying who we are. I promise to let you change me, because you already have, and I'm better for it. They exchanged rings, kissed, held each other while their small audience applauded. And for the first time since all of this began, Seraphina felt truly free. Not because the violence was gone, not because their world had transformed into something safe, but because she'd stopped being a victim of other people's choices and become the architect of her own life. She'd survived the cathedral, survived the warehouse, survived the factory and the revelations and the impossible weight of loving someone built from violence. And she'd emerged on the other side still standing, still painting, still choosing life over surrender. That night, lying in bed with Lucien's arms around her and moonlight painting the room silver, Seraphina thought about the girl she used to be. The art student who believed the world was fundamentally kind, who thought safety was guaranteed and love was simple. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone harder, scarred, complicated. Someone who understood that love could be messy and dangerous and still worth choosing. Someone who knew that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about building something better from its ruins. What are you thinking? Lucien murmured against her hair. That we survived each other. Is that enough? Yeah. Seraphina turned in his arms until they were face to face. Yeah, I think it is. Because survival was its own kind of victory. And sometimes, in a world built on violence and broken things, choosing to stay was the bravest thing anyone could do. Outside, Rome slept. Inside, two people who'd been weapons learned what it meant to be human again. Not perfect, not innocent, but chosen. And sometimes, chosen love, messy and scarred and fought for every single day, was the strongest thing left standing in a broken world. Seraphina closed her eyes and let herself believe in tomorrow, in art that transformed pain into beauty, in a man who'd chosen mercy over revenge, in a future built on honesty instead of lies. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be theirs, and that was enough.